Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as a return guest of the podcast, Becca Pearce. Becca Pearce understands firsthand how hard change can be. Two life-altering events forced her to realize that what she once wanted no longer felt right. The resulting journey reshaped her path, upending everything she had believed about success and happiness. Over the last 12 years, Becca has learned the value of vulnerability, the importance of optimism, and the imperative to find the life that you want to live now, because we're never promised tomorrow. A former CEO and state official, she is now the president of Extend Coaching and Consulting, a firm dedicated to helping people find the courage to live the life they've been dreaming of. Becca, welcome back to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been looking forward to our return conversation for quite some time now.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me back.
Oh, you're welcome. And our first episode, I think we recorded in March of this year, and we covered a variety of different topics. We talked about your wonderful book, You Don't Have to Achieve to Be Loved. We talked about, I think, phase one, which is unfortunate awareness. We talked about why vulnerability is so important, why change is so important, and why individuals may be resistant to change. And also your philosophy in terms of your work as a coach with individuals that request services. And it was just a great, far-reaching conversation. And today we decided collaboratively that we're going to talk about another phase in your book, which is Mourning the Past, and also talking about, redefining success and how we choose to show up for tragedy. So I think that about covers it, unless I'm missing something.
You absolutely are not missing anything. That I think is a great place to kind of continue the discussion for your listeners to know that you and I just have conversations, right? Like as we talk, there's just kind of so much synergy. And one of the things that we talked about is this, how do you want to show up for other people, and who are you post tragedy? And how that just becomes this. What's the word I'm looking for? Maybe this underlying thought of like, at least it wakes me up. When I wake up every day, I think to myself, who do I want to show up as today? Because we have that option. And there are days that, and to be clear, my tragedy is nowhere near what other people's tragedies are. At the same time, there are days that I wake up and I'm sad that I have to tape my eye shut at night, that I still have these disabilities, that I am worried about hearing in my good ear because I'm deaf in my deaf ear, things like that. But I can choose to let those things take over, or I can choose to wake up and show up differently and happy that I'm here today.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we tend to lose sight of when we're in tragedy, is that we have a choice in terms of how we respond to it. I'm sure you've run into individuals who have, however they define tragedy, who have chosen not to transcend it. And I've always believed that that's been a choice. Once you wallow in the muck of the despair of your situation, and you have to do that, you have to really let the pain envelop you. You have to let the pain teach you. But then there comes a point where you have to make a decision. You come to a crossroads. Am I going to live, or am I going to die? Am I going to choose to re-engage in a world that is totally different? But can I accept that and still determine that I want to be of service to others, and still determine that I want to move my best foot forward? I've never really bought the fact that we have to be a victim of our circumstances, because that just reinforces learned helplessness.
I agree. It's interesting because I know several people who have an illness or a surgery or something that they allow that to define them. And it becomes sort of that discussion forever and ever. And I will say that it took me years to get past that. When my face was paralyzed for several years, I felt like it needed to be almost the first thing out of my mouth. I had a brain tumor, and it was almost as if I was apologizing. Well, that's why my face looks like it did. And now I just have gotten to the point where Malala said the same thing. I'm here, right? Let's just live the fact that I am here and be able to show that to other people to say, I too am strong enough to come out of this, and so are you. I think that's the most important thing for those of us who are in this space. Once you have gotten through that wallowing, and I totally agree with you that you need to allow yourself that space. But once you begin to come out that other side, you become that light for other people.
Yeah, exactly. And that wallowing is necessary because, we can't just suppress the pain. We have to experience that. There's no shortcut around that. I just recently got my Reiki 1 certification in Usui Holy Fire Reiki. And Mikhail Usui, he talks about the 5 basic principles of Reiki is that I will be grateful. I will not worry. I will not be angry. I will show gratitude and I will work hard. And one of the things that I've learned is to show gratitude for not who's not in my life, but who's in my life and for what I have as opposed to what I don't have. My definition of success, because of my own tragedies, we've talked about that privately, because of my own life-altering tragedy, my definition of success is totally different now. It isn't about achievement. It's about, am I making an impact? One of the things I see is I call it the battle for relevance, where I see individuals, look at me, this is what I'm doing. Well, what good is it if you're gone and your message dies with you? It's like, I want the message to live on, not me, but I
Right.
want the message that I tried to impart, the lessons that I've tried to teach or to model. I want those to live on long after me, because if they do, Becca, for both you and me,
Yeah.
we're going to be immortal.
Right.
We're going to go on. Nobody is going to remember me. A few people might remember the podcast when I go, and might remember some of my accomplishments, but they're going to remember more so what was the impact that Dave Roberts left on this earth. What was the impact that he left on me? That's what they're going to remember. They're going to carry that message, and hopefully they'll carry that on to somebody else, and that somebody else will carry it on to somebody else. That, to me, is success. Was that always my definition? No.
Right.
But, life tends to kind of force you to redefine who you
Yeah,
are.
it's interesting because for me, I have a personal mission to touch 10,000 people with one tidbit of information that changes the way they think. I don't even care if they remember it was from me,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think I don't care if it's Becca Pearce said, I just want somebody to recognize that, like, oh, I heard this person say this and it touched me in some way. And so I think that becomes that immortal piece.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Let me just go back to something else that you said too, that I think is really just kind of tie it back. Because you mentioned it is this, if we go back to kind of this redefinition of success and this process that you go through, right? This wallowing process and this mourning, if you think about in change, and I define in the book the change process that everybody goes through. And I think the phase of the process that we're talking about today is really mourning the past. Because what happens in this phase is, this is where you think to yourself, but I really liked that person. But I really like, a lot of times you end up with an unwanted identity, right? Like I was then a brain tumor survivor and I now, I have disabilities and it's all these unwanted identities, but I really liked kind of this person that I used to be. And I had to go through that mourning phase of recognizing that, like, okay, yes, that person was great. And but I've redefined who I want to be. And I no longer, just to add a little bit to the story, I was this high-powered CEO, right? Um, that got me to where I was. But when I redefined my success to move from that achievement piece to the place where I really just wanted to touch people and help people individually through coaching. It's a totally different identity and a totally different definition of success. But I had to mourn everything that I was in the past to get to the point where I was okay with that I was happy being who I was.
How challenging was that for you to mourn your past?
I mean, I went through several coaches to help me through it. I would work with multiple different coaches, and I always have multiple coaches in my life, by the way. But there was a lot of work on, for a time recognizing that maybe there were two sides of me, there was the old me and the new me. And it wasn't until I began to understand that they can coincide within me that that there are pieces of that former Rebecca that I still carry with me today. And those are the pieces that feed me and move forward with my clients. And there are pieces that I was able to let go. But it wasn't until all of that work kind of came together. So it probably was a good year of confusion for me. Who do I want to be?
Yeah. And what's my world going to look like?
Exactly.
And I was thinking about this, before we started recording this morning, is that mourning the past is in a way like the deconstruction of self. We get rid of those things that no longer serve us in our new reality moving forward. We substitute other things that are going to serve us moving forward, and we repurpose or rechannel other characteristics that served us well. Like I could see your past experience as a CEO, those skills that you have translating quite nicely to your coaching practice.
Right. And they do. And I think that's the interesting thing is that when I talk to people about my coaching, it is that combination of what does that mean to your bottom line? What are you doing? Like just that very direct kind of what's going on, coupled with, okay, let's talk about the emotions that are actually keeping you from making the smart decision that you want to be making. And it is that combination that I now bring with me to my coaching that I think is that conglomeration of the two that makes everything so special and makes me feel like, yes, it was the merging of the two that created this me now.
Yeah. And the other thing is like the emotion that's involved is it's sadness in some ways. For me, it was sadness because I had to give parts of myself that, though I knew weren't going to serve me moving forward, they were still part of me. And that was a part of my identity. So I had to mourn that. And I had to mourn, and I've walked away now from things that I've been a part of for several years, but I walked away because it's no longer feeding my soul. Was there some sadness involved with that? Was there some hesitancy involved with that? Absolutely, because that had been a part of me. But the fact of the matter is that with a lot of support, with a lot of help, and then with a lot of my own determination, I just chose to walk away from it because it was no longer relevant to me in my chapter of life moving forward. And it's a process. And the other thing you mentioned is you had several coaches help you through the mourning phase. Well, I think it's good to have more than one coach because one coach can't supply you what the other coach can. So it's like you have a team, you have your own community. I've learned that it's okay to have more than one spiritual teacher. You don't want to learn from just one person. You want to have a variety of different individuals who could give you different perspectives and how to create greater awareness within yourself and be of service to others. So, heck, we need a community of support.
Yeah.
I think to get to the next phase of our lives, to help us repurpose our lives.
And I think the interesting thing for me is this recognition that at the time, while my husband and daughter are absolutely the world to me, and my husband is my best friend, there were pieces that he couldn't help me with. There were pieces that I very much needed somebody from the outside to see the things that I couldn't see, to tell me the things that nobody else would tell me, to, force me to look at things differently. And the people in our lives that we have close to us want to do that. And even your best friend may not be the one that can help you through this. And so it's this recognition that it's okay to reach out for help from other people.
And again, this is where I think administrative skills can come in handy because you can look at a situation and say, okay, who do I need at this particular moment to help me with this? And it may be this person as opposed to this person. And the other thing is that I think, we talked about this in the first episode about vulnerability. We can learn that we can be vulnerable with this individual and trust him with a part of myself because we know that person has had experience with it. But does it mean we have to have a long-lasting relationship? Absolutely not. It's just this person is going to give us what we need at that point, and then we can choose before tragedy or after tragedy if we want to develop a relationship with that person down the road. But we have free will to determine the extent of the relationship once we become vulnerable. And vulnerable doesn't mean that if you, you know, expose your feelings, you express your feelings, that you're going to get hurt. It just means I'm comfortable enough with you where I think you can help me with this particular chapter of my life.
Well, and I think the interesting thing is two things here. One is that, friends come into your life for a reason or a season, right? And recognizing who those people are that can help you, and they don't, like you said, they don't have to be long term. Maybe they fit right at that moment, something along those lines. That thing that I also think is interesting is that we as humans, when you have a cadre of people to choose from, you're going to choose the person that you think is going to give you the answer that you want, whether or not you realize that or not, which is why paying for a coach whose job it is to tell you the things that nobody else is going to tell you is so powerful too, because they're the ones who can actually, I was going to use the word force, but challenge you to see things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't want somebody to just tell you what you want to hear unless you really are ambivalent about change
Right.
or are not vested in change. I'm going to seek out somebody that's going to tell me probably what I don't want to hear, but what I
Right.
need to hear. But I'm going to go into that relationship knowing that they're not going to just just blow sweet sunshine my way. They're just going to give it to me straight. And though it might be an uncomfortable truth, it's a necessary one that I need to sit with and process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is, if you are in this space of mourning the past, that's the type of support that you need. You need somebody who can see and love not only the you are now, but the you want to become, the pieces
Right.
that you are trying to let go of and trying to embrace, finding somebody who can see all of that. And what happens for us when we rely on the people that we know is that they inadvertently are choosing one over the other.
Yep.
They don't mean to. They have the best interest, best intentions, but their brain is always also trying to keep you in a space. And so finding somebody, it doesn't need to be a coach. It can be, like a spiritual somebody or somebody just outside of the situation. If you are in this place where you are stuck, seeking somebody outside of your immediate boundary of close friends and family are the ones who are going to help you see bigger and differently.
Absolutely. And you know what's been coming up for me, and I wanted to talk to you about this and get your take on this. The older I get, the more my past comes up. And it's not because I have any regrets about the past. I mean, we can't change the past. We can learn from it. But as I get older, certain parts of my past will come up and demand that I take a look at it. And I don't think for me, there's anything wrong with that because I think as I've evolved, my past is going to evolve with me. And my past is always a part of my present. So as my present becomes different, I'm going to look at my past differently. And I've been doing that lately, and it's been kind of an interesting process where I've kind of gone from mourning the past to, okay, let's see what the past can teach me. But I wanted to get your take on that, and if that's something you've run into with your clients, if they've asked you, geez, what if, as I continue to evolve, what if my past continues to come up? Is that necessarily a bad thing?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that what ends up happening is that you see your past differently. And I think that once you get to the point where you say to yourself, it is this reinvention thing, that reinvention is what allows you to look at your past differently and say, oh, now I get it. Oh, that's interesting. That led to that and that led to that. And now I've reinterpreted it in a different way. But it's really allowing yourself to get to that point where you do redefine success. Let's talk about redefining success for a minute, because I think that is We are handed a definition of success. We're handed it from society. We're handed it from our parents. We're handed it from social media. We're handed it from our culture. And until I think that people get to this reinvention phase or this who am I going to be after tragedy phase, we're not forced to look at ourselves and say, well, what really matters to me?
Yep.
And so once you have that space to really decide for yourself what matters in life, and you have the opportunity to redefine for yourself personally exactly what success means, that gives you the opportunity to look back at your life and say, oh, turns out I was chasing somebody else's dream and I didn't realize it.
Yeah, I mean, the definitions of success are so externally defined. I grew up as an only child. My father left when I was 5. My mother raised me, and I kept hearing, from her family, and their intentions were good. Well, you got to do good for your mother. You got to do good in school. So I internalized this message of perfectionism. And my definition of success was, when it was, don't do anything that's going to hurt your mom. And and don't get me wrong, my mother was extremely supportive of me. If it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have learned the value of education. And she typed my papers for me. She helped me study for tests. So she was great. I mean, the person I am is because of my mom, but that whole piece of success was defined for me in terms of achievement. And as I got older, I chased, from 25 to my mid 40s, trying to get as many promotions at work as I can to provide for my family, trying to achieve as much educationally as I could. None of this stuff about making an impact even occurred to me. It was all about what can I do to secure my family's future. For me, that was making an impact. But until my own tragedy occurred, life-altering tragedy occurred, I couldn't force me to look at that definition differently. But until that happened, Becca would have gone on the same course and probably would not feel as fulfilled with my life as I do now.
Well, and I think that that is a common story. I think that story is, it's a cliche that people who have had a life-altering scenario rethink the definition of success. And there's a reason for that.
Mm.
All of us realize that it was just a great big lie. Like
Yeah.
everything that we thought, all of the success, this title and power and money and all of those things and promotion and security for your family. And I'm going to go back to that security one for a second, because security over a certain point, right? We over indexed on security. Well, I have to have the job that makes X amount of money because I have to make this money for my family. And now that we are living in the space that we're living in now, I've got to do more, right? And it captures us in that success drive. Once you are handed something that has you look at life differently, which for many of us ends up being some form of tragedy.
Yep.
Once you're handed that, that's the opportunity to say, wait a minute, something's not right. Grabbing that by the horns and saying, okay, what do I want to do differently is the power to show up differently.
Yep. And, there are times that I wish I could have had a different form of tragedy other than the death
Yeah.
of my daughter to get me to that point. But as I've said on podcasts, I've guessed on this one, we don't have any control over the tragedies that are going to come our way. It's just how we respond to it. And, like you, I had a choice. I could have withered away and died an emotional, spiritual, and physical death, or I could have reengaged again. And I chose the latter, and I'm glad I did. But I know we run into people who just choose not to do that. And, we have free will, but it's like, boy, you're missing out on a lot if you choose not to grow from what's happened, the circumstances that you've been presented with. And it is basically, it's not just a loss for them, it's a loss for anybody else who may be impacted by the good work and the meaningful work that they could do moving forward. So,
like I said, I know 2 people who are kind of stuck in this place right now of, it is my definition. One person had a very traumatic surgery and lives in that space where this is who she is now. And it's changed the person that, it changed how she showed up. She's not as carefree as she used to be. And she, and I get that there are many things that go along with that. And then another person who, another tragedy that I actually don't even want to talk about, but is still in that space of like, this is the definition of who I am. And I'm really hoping and watching and waiting for them to come out the other side, because I miss them. I miss their joy, and I miss their light, and I know that they still got it in them. I'm just waiting for it to come out.
And that's an interesting point too, because when you are missing the best qualities of somebody else, you mourn that too.
Yeah.
And that's a form of grief. We mourn the loss of those individuals, the loss of those qualities that made them so endearing to us in the first place. We're sad for them, but we're also sad for us. And so we're
Yeah.
doing double duty as it pertains to grief. So um, let me ask you, but going back to success for a minute, can there be success in failure? And if so, is failure an illusion?
Can there be success in failure? When I ran the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange, I lost my job quite publicly because it didn't turn on the way it was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Yet by the time that I left in open enrollment that year, we enrolled 300,000 people in health insurance who had never had health insurance before. I had grown an organization from 0 to 100 people. I had gotten 3 state agencies to get along, and we had created legislation that would allow Obamacare to exist in the state of Maryland.
Yep.
So the question is, are those successes within inside of a failure? Absolutely. Right? And so I think it really becomes a question of whose definition of failure. Now, let's be clear. Any newspaper, any news outlet, anybody would look at that and say that that was a failure because the system didn't turn on the way it was supposed to. When the federal government sued the company who was in charge of this, that they probably considered it a failure too.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a heck of a lot of successes inside of that. And so is failure an illusion? So the first part of your answer to your question is absolutely there is success inside of failure. And I think the question is really, how do you look at it and how do you fail forward?
Yep.
Right? Because without failure, there is no innovation.
That's right.
And so I think maybe I would say that the connotation that failure is a bad thing is a misnomer.
Yeah, I've learned to look at so-called failures as being opportunities to improve processes, opportunities to improve personally, professionally. As I've gotten older, I think the connotation of failure is different for me now. Do I still get upset? Yeah, the human experience will say that I get disappointed. I get a little upset when things don't go according to plan. But then once I regroup and say, okay, what do we do well here? And what can we do now? What can I learn from this to improve going forward? And that's incrementally. It's not
And I
only growth
think that's,
professionally. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's the important thing. And I forget who it is talking about people leaving a mark on you, that somebody says there are no failures, there's just learning.
Yep.
And I think that is really the most important piece. And I think that connotation comes when other people put on this, oh, you failed. But maybe for me, it was a learning
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing.
And success, like failure, can be externally defined, can be externally determined.
Yes. Yep.
So
But
go
it
ahead.
can be for others, but only you can truly define your own success, and only you can define your failure.
That's right. We need to learn to see the world through our own eyes and not through anybody else's eyes. We need to become empowered as opposed to become disempowered or beholden to other people's perceptions of what they see our successes or failure is, or and how we choose to honor our past or not. We have to
There's
make that determination.
there's
Yeah.
an interesting study that was done about Americans and the definition of success. And Americans, by and large, believe that happiness is the definition of success. But Americans also believe that others think it should be money and power and title. And
Mhm.
so we're all living in this space where we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? Because we think they think that's what we want.
Yeah.
So it's just this very kind of weird thing, but really ultimately it's only your definition. But I would ask you, when's the last time you wrote down your own definition? For your listeners, when's the last time you wrote down your definition of success? And maybe it's time to actually put it down on paper so you stop moving the goalposts on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Carl Jung would kind of disagree that happiness is the key to success. I would think he would say that would be one part of it, but without Carl Jung, we wouldn't have had the shadow element,
Right.
which is every other emotion that isn't happiness, but yet leads to fulfillment and authenticity. And our ability to kind of learn from those emotions, acknowledge those emotions, and honor those emotions can also be our own personal definition of success. So success can mean genuineness.
Mm-hmm.
So
Your teaching is coming up.
yes, yeah,
I love it.
well, your teaching's coming out too. Together, the mantra of this podcast is we're students and teachers, so let's learn from each other. So I think we've modeled that quite effectively for our audience today.
I think so too.
But Becca, I got a couple of more questions for you before we wrap up.
Okay.
The first question, and this is something, it's a surprise question that I'm going to throw at you. If you could define the perfect day for yourself, but not for anybody else, what would that perfect day look like for you?
I review this with myself on a regular basis. The perfect day for me involves a dog walk. It involves a run. It involves playing the piano. It involves spending time with my family. And maybe an hour or two of work, Like I'm still trying to figure out, because I still love the intellectual stimulation. And so that needs to be in there too. But those are the things that feed me on a regular basis. And sunshine, by the way. It could be 78 or 80 degrees and sunny every day. I would be in heaven.
There was nothing in there about, a little bit about work, but nothing in there about the bottom line. It's just things that are going to make us happy.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
Becca, you've left us with a lot of good stuff today, about redefining success and mourning the past. But if you wanted our listeners to remember just one thing from our conversation today, what would that be?
The one thing I really want to reiterate is you have the power to define your own definition of success if you really sit down and think about it, because we always move the goalposts unless it's written down. I want you to be able to write it down and say, check, I did it. Now I can set a new definition.
I like it. And my last question, people want to get in touch with you, purchase your wonderful book. You don't have to achieve to be loved. I'm going to hold this up one more time. Contract for your coaching services. What's the best way for them to do that?
The best way to do that is to go to morebeccapearce.com, and Pearce is Pearce. So morebeccapearce.com. You can find out about my book. You can find out about my coaching. You can find out about the speaking I do nationally across the country. And you can also join my newsletter there.
And I'll make sure your contact information, book information gets in the episode notes before we go live. But Becca, thanks again for the wonderful conversation. It's always great when we could get together and solve the problems of the world, so to speak. And hopefully we could do this again sometime.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you again.
You're welcome. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.